welcome back to your Debates 2015. It is now time to move on to your candidates for VP Democracies and Creative Industries. Please make your way to the stage. Hello, so if you'd just like to introduce yourselves, Kerry, if you want to go first.
Hello, I'm Kerry. I'm a third-year English student. I'm currently Deputy Editor of the Wessex Scene, and I'm running for VP Democracy and Creative Industries.
I'm Chris McGeehan. I'm a third-year biologist, and I'm the current Student Groups Officer.
Okay, lovely. So we have a huge amount of media groups at Southampton. I'm sure you've been involved with some of them yourselves. You've got SUSUtv, Surge Radio, The Edge, Wessex Scene, all of those and many more. What do you think the single biggest challenge facing these media groups is next year, and what will you do about it? Chris, if you want to start.
I think for the media groups, the biggest challenge is them maintaining their independence and them continuing to be led by the student leaders. And I think one of the key points there is giving them total control over their budgets. They have a protected budget at the moment, but it's sort of a mishmash of things in how much control they have over that. So I think it's key to give them more access to the numbers so that they can work it out and so that they can plan within that budget how they're going to spend it over the course of the year. So that's one of the things that I'd try and do for them.
Okay, great. Kerry?
I actually think it's a little bit reductive to narrow it down to one issue, because obviously there's lots of things they face: budgeting, autonomy, engagement. So I'd say overall a big issue, especially considering that the committees change every year, is to make sure that they can be as ambitious and as innovative as they can possibly be. So my plans for this would centre around, first and foremost, putting the student leaders, their wants and their teams' wants first. So look at what other student unions are doing around the country and what their department's successes are, and then putting plans in place to make sure our student leaders can achieve the things they want to see for their departments.
So obviously we were talking about media groups and how many there are at Southampton. Have either of you been involved with these groups, and do you think that will help you running for this position? Kerry, if you want to start.
Yes, well, since my start of my time here, I've been writing for the Wessex Scene, then features editor, and now deputy editor. I've started to have a show on Surge with the Wessex Scene. I've created and presented videos for SUSUtv, and we've also just done a collaborative LGBT History Month with The Edge. So I've got quite a lot of experience with all of them, and I think this will really help just knowing the people and what they want to see out of their departments, because first and foremost we should be enjoying them and having fun. So I think that relationship will really help me.
I have experience around the outside of the media groups, I guess. Last year, being the Creative Industries Student Groups rep, I sat on the Creative Industries Committee along with the media heads. And then I have been involved in small respects with, well, I suppose Union Films. I've had a year pass every year I've been here. And SUSUtv, I've dabbled around with filming for them and getting involved with that a little bit. So that's how I've been involved with them.
Okay, brilliant. So with your role as VP DCI, whoever is elected, so you'll be responsible for student groups policy generally. And at the moment, sports development receives 70% of group funds and education receives 1%. Is this justifiable? And if not, what are you going to do to improve this in the future? Chris, if you want to start.
Not at all. I think sitting there earlier and listening to the sports development zone candidates, they were a little bit deluded. At a university, we are an organisation that caters for education, and I don't think that it's fair for them to be in that situation. They also, the sports development zone candidates, were under the impression that groups are treated equally. They're not at the moment. We're seriously lacking on how we allocate funding across the zones, and that's something that we need to get better at, and we're starting to do it, but it needs to be pushed so much further. So that's something I would change a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo Chris in saying that the CC's mission statement is to enrich the life of every student, and how can we do this if we're not giving equal support across all the areas of student life? So what I would do is start an investigation into sort of the root of the problem. Why is this massive disparity here? Because education has the lowest average allocation per group, so it's obviously an issue. And then in the short term, as my manifesto is laid out, I want to be more active in supporting student group budgeting. So perhaps making education aware of alternative funding, such as the Education Enhancement Fund. So I work short-term and long-term to resolve that issue.
Chris, just picking up on what you said, you were saying that we come to university mainly for education, which of course is the point, but you're running for a role which is VP DCI, so it's with creative industries as well. Are you saying that creative industries are just part of an excess of uni, they're not as important as education?
No, definitely not. I think one of the best things that you get when you go to university are all the sort of soft skills and the surrounding skills you get around your degree. I know plenty of people who, from their experience in the creative industry side of things, have moved and got jobs in that area rather than their degree. And a lot of the things that we do in democracy as well really help benefit people. And I know people that equally have gone and worked in those areas. And I think in terms of how students get involved with SUSU, student groups and democracy is the biggest area of how students get involved with SUSU. So that's why it's so important, and that's basically why I'm running for the role.
Okay, thank you. Kerry, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, obviously, creative industries is personally my biggest passion, but as I mentioned before, I think equal attention is deserved in all the aspects of student life. It wouldn't be fair if we didn't. So we do need to look at making sure that student groups policy is clear and it's consistent, it's transparent, and that everyone can engage with democracy and get the most out of their time here in whatever function of student life that might be.
Okay, so moving on to another question. Union Council can arguably be an archaic way of dealing with what we think is important for the union. Seeing as every student can now vote on anything very quickly, 24 hours a day, using social media, do you think it's time to rethink how we view democracy, Kerry?
Well, first of all, I think we do need to rethink it, but in tested and measured ways. We can't just sort of quickly overhaul Union Council. It does have benefits. You get a group of elected representatives who have good inside knowledge about procedure. Having said this, can 82 representatives represent the whole of the student body? So what I would do is, as I've laid out in my manifesto, investigate how students want to engage with democracy, and then I would look into trialling a dual system of things like innovative ways with social media to get them to vote, while still keeping Union Council going as a backup.
Okay, and Chris?
So, in a word, yes. I don't think it's fit for purpose really anymore. Even next year, it's not even going to be 82 students sitting on Union Council, it's going to be 58, which is even less representative, arguably. I do think we need to look at better ways that we can get our whole student body involved in both debating about issues that they care about and in voting on those issues. So a case in point would be last year at a Union Council meeting when we talked about strike action. There were people that I'd never seen before there, and they were really emotive, but they couldn't really speak on that issue. And so I think it's definitely something that we need to improve, perhaps by just copying another system that is seen elsewhere to work well.
Okay. So a lot of the roles that we have in the media groups are voluntary. So things like station managers do a lot of work for whatever field they're in, but it takes up a lot of their time, but it's completely voluntary. Union films are also completely voluntary, but they have a lot of pressure to make a profit each year. So how do you think you could balance out the commercial needs with the volunteering aspect, Chris?
Specifically for union films?
For union films, yeah.
I think union films do spectacularly well with what they do. They've got really, really good at putting on large events and aiming for bigger things that you don't even see commercial cinemas doing. And it's spectacular what they achieve and the passion they all put into that. And I think that the things I've got in my manifesto to help support volunteers in terms of training and recognition that they can then evidence to employers and such would benefit them, because it is one of the areas that we have the most number of volunteers involved.
Okay, Kerry?
Yeah, as it is a voluntary role, as I was saying, it is all about the fun and enjoyment for the cinema manager. So I would look at what their goals and their wishes are, and I would sort of handle the more bureaucratic aspects of balancing the commercial side, and make sure we have a clear guidelines on balancing the difference between the commercial and the voluntary, and just making sure that I have continual communication with all of their team and the commercial side to make sure that everyone's working together towards the same ends, really.
Okay. So if we talk about the elections generally, despite spending literally thousands of pounds every year, most students don't vote and probably won't vote in these union elections. So do you think it's a glorified popularity contest fought out between a minority of students, or do you think that it's the best way? How would you change this, Kerry?
To some extent, honestly, I do think it is a bit of a glorified popularity contest at the moment. As I've laid out in my manifesto, I think apathy is a huge issue we have to deal with. So it would centre in changing how students engage with democracy throughout the year. You can't just leave it to elections, because elections themselves do stand as a democratic process, but it's the way that the students react with them. So as I've outlined, I would launch an investigation, and then from the results of that, look at an integrated media campaign, and just really challenging the ways that students get involved to make sure that it really is representing everyone.
I think it's all very well to talk about launching a survey and a campaign and other questions and so on and so forth. We've done lots of things this year. We've made the elections period longer. We've promoted it in a very different and interesting way, but it still sort of hasn't really worked. And I think what we need to concentrate on more than forcing students to be engaged in the democratic process is giving them a reason to be involved, and we need to do that by improving what SUSU gives students and how SUSU works, so that they want to get involved. We can't force the engagement on the students by doing various different things. We have to provide them a reason to get involved and to care.
Okay, so do you think maybe it's also to do with how people are campaigning as well? Because saying it's a glorified popularity contest, if you're promoting yourself on Facebook, surely that's the extent of where your friendships start, and then you can share and go from there. So how would you change perhaps the way people advertise? Kerry?
Well, it depends if you're talking about it in the long term or not, because obviously it's sort of at this stage of the game, it is very much about the way you can campaign. But if we look at a long run of student engagement with SUSU, then we can change that, and we can have more engagement with different ways of campaigning. So I know we've tried some different things this year, but we really need to be innovative in, like Chris says, giving them reasons to show why should they care, not forcing them to vote at all, but making them see what SUSU does for them and why and how they can make their vote count.
I think perhaps one of the things as well that we're perhaps doing too much this year is we're relying too much on the candidates to get students involved, and that there's more of a role for SUSU as an organisation to play in getting SUSU in advertising the elections as an independent thing. And I think partly why I think that is, like, we don't even have any joke candidates this year, and I think that's a real problem, because it's a shame, because it makes it a lot less fun for everybody if there are no joke candidates running, and if everyone's sort of just, I mean, there's two of us, there's one VP Education candidate, and I think that's indicative of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's the lowest amount of candidates we've had in many years, so it's definitely something to think about. Okay, so can we just have a quick roundup of what you want to achieve and why people should vote for you, Kerry?
Okay, so my main points of my manifesto centre in increasing empowerment of student volunteers through recognition and support, also increasing the autonomy and freedom of the media, and tackling negative perceptions and apathy surrounding SUSU democracy. So vote for me for a DCI, that would be legend Kerry.
And Chris?
So people should vote for me because I'm the candidate who has the most experience in both democracy and creative industries. I want to support and recognise our thousands of student volunteers that we have across the student groups, performing arts and the creative industries groups. I want to make sure that the creative industries groups can develop and grow while taking a hands-off editorial role and give them the things they need to do that. And I want to put in place aspects of long-term strategic planning that mean that students are at the heart of everything that SUSU plans to do and at the heart of everything we do. So that's why you should vote for Chris McGeehan for VP Democracy and Creative Industries.
Okay, thank you. Well, that is your VP DCI debate. Thank you so much. Next up, we'll be having VP Welfare after a quick break.